The French Revolution and the birth of modern nationalism. The French Revolution of 1789 fundamentally transformed the political imagination of Europe and permanently altered how people understood power, identity, and belonging. Before 1789, loyalty was owed primarily to monarchs, dynasties, and religious institutions. The revolution shattered this worldview by introducing the radical idea that sovereignty belonged not to kings but to the nation, itself a collective of citizens bound together by shared rights, laws, and political will. This concept of nationalism was explosive. It suggested that governments derived legitimacy from the people, not divine authority, and that citizens had the right, perhaps even the duty, to reshape their political systems. Across Europe, rulers watched France with horror as centuries-old hierarchies collapsed. When Napoleon Bonaparte rose to power and carried revolutionary ideals across the continent through conquest, nationalism spread even further. French armies dismantled feudal systems, abolished aristocratic privileges, and imposed legal equality wherever they marched. Yet Napoleon's defeat in 1815 did not erase the ideological consequences of his reign. At the Congress of Vienna, Europe's great powers Austria, Prussia, Russia, and Great Britain is tempted to turn back the clock. Their goal was to restore traditional monarchy, suppress nationalism and liberalism, and erase what they viewed as the dangerous legacy of 1789. Borders were redrawn to strengthen conservative rule, and revolutionary ideas were officially condemned. However, ideas are harder to defeat than armies. Beneath the surface of restored monarchies, nationalism and liberalism continued to spread, especially among students, intellectuals, the middle class, and urban workers. By the 1840s, Europe faced a profound ideological crisis. Monarchists, liberals, socialists, and nationalists all competed to define the future. Economic hardship, population growth, industrialization, and political repression intensified tensions. When revolution finally erupted again in 1848, it was not an isolated uprising but a continental explosion, a direct consequence of unresolved conflicts. Dating back to 1789, the revolutionary wave would engulf France, the Italian states, the German lands, and the Austrian Empire, marking the most widespread political upheaval Europe had seen in decades and laying the foundations for future conflicts, including the Franco-Prussian War. France, after 1789, from monarchy to revolutionary crisis, France is the birthplace of modern nationalism, remained the epicenter of revolutionary turbulence throughout the 19th century. After the fall of Napoleon in 1815, the country returned to hereditary monarchy under the Bourbon Restoration, an arrangement designed to satisfy Europe's conservative powers rather than the French people. This uneasy compromise collapsed in 1830, when another revolution replaced the Bourbons with Louis Philippe, a ruler who styled himself as the citizen king. Although his reign promised moderation and constitutional governance, it quickly became clear that political power rested in the hands of wealthy industrialists and financiers. Voting rights were restricted, workers were excluded from meaningful participation, and inequality deepened as France industrialized. Political life fractured into competing factions, Orleanists supporting Louis Philippe's house, Legitimists backing the old Bourbon line, Republicans demanding democracy, and Socialists calling for economic justice. By the late 1840s, social tensions had reached a breaking point. Influential observers like Alexis de Tocqueville warned that revolution was imminent, noting that working-class grievances had become social and systemic rather than purely political. In February 1848, unrest erupted in Paris. Demonstrations escalated into revolution, forcing Louis Philippe to abdicate and flee. The monarchy collapsed once again, and France declared the Second Republic. Initially, the revolution united middle-class liberals, socialists, and workers under the banner of liberty, equality, and fraternity. The new republic introduced ambitious reforms, including universal male suffrage, the right to work, and the abolition of slavery in French colonies. Yet this fragile alliance soon unraveled. Middle-class leaders feared radical socialism, while workers grew desperate as unemployment soared. When government-funded employment programs were shut down, Parisian workers revolted in June 1848. Barricades rose across the city in what many historians describe as a brief but brutal civil war. The uprising was crushed with overwhelming force. Thousands of workers were killed, imprisoned, or deported. The Republic survived, but its character had fundamentally changed. Power shifted to conservative bourgeois elites who prioritized order over democracy, setting the stage for the Republic's eventual collapse. From Republic to Empire, the rise of Louis Napoleon. After the bloody suppression of the June days, France entered a period of reaction and consolidation. Although the country remained a republic in name, real authority rested with conservative elites united in the Party of Order, a coalition determined to prevent further revolutionary upheaval. The majority of the population, rural peasants, valued stability over radical reform and felt little connection to urban socialist movements. This divide deeply frustrated socialist thinkers like Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, who famously lamented the countryside's rejection of revolutionary ideals. In December 1848, voters elected Louis Napoleon Bonaparte as president in a landslide victory. His name carried immense symbolic power, evoking memories of his uncle Napoleon I, glory, and national greatness. Despite his electoral success, Louis Napoleon had little commitment to democratic principles. When constitutional limits threatened his authority, he acted decisively. In December 1851, he staged a violent coup, dissolved parliament, and justified his actions as necessary to save France from chaos. Within a year, he transformed the republic into an empire, crowning himself Emperor Napoleon III. The Revolution of 1848, which had begun with democratic aspirations, ended in authoritarian rule by 1852. Yet the consequences of the February Revolution extended far beyond France's borders. News of the Paris uprising spread rapidly across Europe, igniting hope among liberals and nationalists elsewhere. Nowhere was this more significant than in the German-speaking lands, where long-standing frustrations over political fragmentation and foreign domination resurfaced with renewed intensity. Germany, after Napoleon, nationalism without a nation in the early 19th century. There was no unified German state, only dozens of independent kingdoms, duchies, and principalities loosely connected by language and culture. Following Napoleon's defeat in 1814, German patriots hoped their sacrifices in the wars of liberation would be rewarded with unity and constitutional government. Instead, the Congress of Vienna crushed these expectations. The former Holy Roman Empire was replaced by the German Confederation, a loose association of 38 states designed to preserve aristocratic rule and prevent nationalism from becoming a political force. Austria dominated the Confederation, while Prussia, Russia, and other great powers reserved the right to intervene in its internal affairs. Despite official repression, revolutionary ideas survived. Influenced by the French Revolution, German liberals and Democrats demanded unity, freedom, and constitutional rights. Student fraternities, known as Burschenschaften, played a crucial role in spreading nationalist sentiment. Founded in 1815, these groups promoted civic responsibility and adopted black, red, and gold as symbols of national unity, colors that later became Germany's national flag. In 1817, nationalist students organized the Wartburg Festival, combining patriotic celebration with political protest. Conservative authorities responded with fear, especially after violent incidents such as the anti-Jewish Hep Hep riots. By 1819, repression intensified, forcing nationalist movements underground. Yet nationalism proved resilient. Inspired by France's 1830 revolution, German activists organized the Hambach Festival in 1832, one of the largest political gatherings of the era. Once again, authorities responded with arrests and censorship. Tensions simmered throughout the 1830s and 1840s, until events in Paris in 1848 reignited revolutionary fervor across the German states. The German revolutions of 1848 and the Frankfurt Parliament Revolution erupted across the German Confederation in early 1848, beginning in regions like Baden and quickly spreading to major cities, including Berlin. Street fighting between revolutionaries and government troops left hundreds dead. In Prussia, King Friedrich Wilhelm IV was forced to make concessions, including appointing liberal ministers and allowing elections for a national assembly. This assembly convened in May 1848 at the Paulskirche in Frankfurt, symbolizing hopes for a unified German nation. Delegates represented the educated bourgeoisie, lawyers, professors, and civil servants, but notably excluded workers, peasants, and artisans. Ideological divisions quickly surfaced. Some delegates favored radical democracy, others constitutional monarchy, and still others conservative compromise. After months of debate, the assembly adopted the Paulskirche Constitution in March 1849, proposing a small German solution that excluded Austria and offered the imperial crown to Friedrich Wilhelm IV. The king refused, declaring he would not accept a crown from revolutionaries rather than fellow monarchs. His rejection marked the death knell of the revolution. Across the German states, rulers reasserted control through military force. Uprisings in Saxony and Baden were brutally suppressed, and the Frankfurt Parliament was dissolved. By mid-1849, the German Revolution had failed. Failure, exile, and the long road to unity. The revolutions of 1848 in France and the German Confederation began under very different circumstances but ended in remarkably similar ways. In both cases, hopes for lasting democracy were crushed by conservative reaction and military power. France transformed its republic into an empire under Napoleon III, while Germany remained fragmented under aristocratic rule. Many defeated German revolutionaries fled abroad, particularly to the United States, where they became known as the 48ers and contributed to American political and intellectual life. Others abandoned revolutionary politics altogether, convinced that reform from within existing systems was the only viable path forward. The German Confederation was restored, and nationalism was temporarily subdued but not destroyed. The events of 1848 demonstrated both the power and the limitations of revolutionary idealism. They revealed that nationalism alone was not enough. Unity required military strength, political leadership, and international power. In the decades that followed, these lessons would be applied with devastating effectiveness, culminating in wars that finally achieved German unification, but at a tremendous human cost. The revolutions of 1848 failed in the short term, yet they permanently reshaped Europe's political consciousness. They proved that the ideals born in 1789 could be suppressed, but never erased, continuing to influence the continent's destiny well into the modern era.